بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I just want to share with you guys a few, just to give you the background story behind why I wrote this book. Now, when I was younger, I grew up in the house of my grandfather. My mom, my dad, we were all living in one house. And if I were to identify one person that has had a profound impact on me, especially on my religious upbringing, it would be my maternal grandfather. Brothers and sisters, one thing that I've noticed is that we don't focus enough on the Holy Quran. I remember growing up, you go to majalis, you go to the masjid, and you can hear many lectures, lecture after lecture, without hearing a single verse of the Holy Quran. When I reflect on Hadith al-Thaqalayn, the famous hadith from the Holy Prophet, which we've all memorized, where the Holy Prophet says, إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمُ الثَّقَلَيْنِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَةِ أَهْلَ بَيْتِي مَا إِن تَمَسَّكْتُمْ بِهِمَا لَن تَضِلُّوا بَعْدِي أَبَدًا. I'm leaving behind two weighty things, the book of Allah and my Ahlul Bayt. If you adhere to both of them, you will never go astray. When I look at the Muslim world today, I don't feel like the Sunnis have adhered to this hadith, nor do I feel like the Shias have done so. If you go to a Sunni masjid, you'll see that there is great focus on the Quran, and I commend them for that. They focus a lot on the Holy Quran. Their children memorize the Quran. You hear their sermons revolve around the Holy Quran, and this is commendable. But you don't hear who? You don't hear about the authorized teachers of the Quran. I remember a dear friend of mine who was a Sheikh. He was raised Christian. He became Muslim, Sunni, and then he converted to Shia Islam. And he told me something very beautiful and very sad at the same time. He says, Sheikh, when I was Sunni, Hassan and Hussein never grew up. They were always the two little boys in Medina. History stops there. You don't hear about what happened to this Hassan and Hussein after the death of the Prophet. You go to many mosques around the world, you hear the Quran, but you don't hear قال علي ibn Abi Talib. You don't hear about Fatima az-Zahra. So on the one hand, you have our Sunni brothers and sisters who have held on to the Quran, but they have released their hand from the Itra. And if you go to many Shia mosques, and I hate to use the word Shia or Sunni, we're all Muslims. But the reality is, we go to many Shia centers. What happens when the Holy Quran is being recited? Everyone is talking. We treat the Holy Quran like it's elevator music. When you're on the elevator, there's music in the background. We just treat it as background noise. You hear majalis, you'll hear 20 ahadith, but not a single ayah of the Quran. Not everybody, but this seems to be the norm. Now, when I grew up, when I was under the care of my grandfather, I was very fortunate to get a very balanced approach to Islam. What do I mean by that? It was a shock for me when I used to come to the masjid and not hear the Holy Quran in many lectures. My grandfather, who passed away 3 years ago, I remember until today, and subhanallah, Amir al-Mu'mineen is right when he says, إنما قلب الحدث كالأرض الخالية. that the heart of a youth is like an uncultivated piece of land. Whatever you put on it, it will take it. When I was young, my bedroom was right across the bedroom of my grandfather. I remember until now, every morning after Salat al-Fajr, I could hear him reciting the Quran. Every morning. Not only that, so my alarm clock, when I was a child, wasn't, you know how you have the ringers, the nuclear invasion ringtone? What used to wake me up in the morning was the recitation of the Holy Quran. Not only did he recite the Holy Quran, but he used to keep a journal. And I discovered this journal after he passed away. He had stacks of journals. He used to write things he'd want to achieve that day. And every day I would see that he wrote an ayah of the Quran that captured his attention during his 30-minute recitation every morning. He had a bond with the Holy Quran. You know, brothers and sisters, I don't come from a scholarly family. You know, it's not that my father was an alim, my grandfather were, you know, some families, they manufacture turbans. I don't come from that kind of family. In fact, I was probably the oddball in my family. I was the most religious one in my family. But my grandfather was unique in the sense that he looked at the world through the Holy Quran. The Quran was his lens. And I'll never forget, there's an ayah in the Quran that I'll never forget until the day I die. And I learned it as a child from him. When we were little kids, you know, we lived in a decent sized house, and we had a swimming pool, which is every kid's dream. We had a swimming pool in our backyard. It was the summertime. I was in elementary school. And I invited my friends over so we can have a pool party. We swim, have a barbecue. So I brought all my friends over. And you know those barbecues that they have outside? So I'm getting ready for my friends to come over. I want to have, you know, kebab, chicken, all the kind of stuff. I opened the grill and I saw a beehive in there. There was a beehive. The brother's saying, MashaAllah. He doesn't know where the story's going. I opened it, I saw a beehive. I think I was maybe 7, 8 years old. So I'm like, no, these bees are not going to ruin my party. So I was going to the garage. You know, you're a little kid. I was going to destroy the beehive. I don't remember what I was going to do. I don't know if I was going to use a baseball bat or set them on fire. I was going to destroy them. As I was going, my grandfather saw me. He says, what happened? What are you doing? I told him, Jiddu, I saw there's a beehive in the grill. I got to destroy it because my friends are coming. I want to have a barbecue. He told me, come here. He showed me an ayah of the Quran that I will never forget until today, until the day I die. He says, come, I want to show you an ayah of the Quran. Surah Al-An'am, Surah 6, verse 38. وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا طَائِرٍ يَطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُمْ. The ayah says there is not an animal on earth, nor a bird that flies in the sky, except they are nations like you. Meaning what? These animals, they have emotions. They're just like you. They have family, they feel joy, they feel sadness, they have siblings, they have community. Why do you want to destroy these creatures? Why do you want to mistreat them? These bees, these creatures that you want to destroy, they do tasbih. They're probably more noble in Allah's eyes than you are, because they never forget Allah. And until that day, He instilled this sense of compassion, not just for human beings, for even animals, because they're like you. Just like you have a community, you have friends, you have relationships, they have the same. You're going to destroy their entire community because you want to swim for an hour? So He still got us kebab and everything, but not from the grill. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is how you teach Islam. The Quran should not just be a book that you open, oh, today's my nikah, let me open up the book and get, it shouldn't be just open when someone dies. He used to record a verse of the Quran and that ayah would be the discussion for the day. We'd have lunch together, he'd bring it up. What do you think this ayah means? And I think this is how we should raise our children. Now if you don't want to do it on a daily basis, at least one ayah per week. Recite the Quran. I'm not saying read a juz'u every day, but after Salatul Dhuhr, read one verse. Is it difficult to read one ayah? When you commute to work, 20, 30 minutes, instead of listening to God knows who, listen to a few verses of the Holy Quran. Try to have the same relationship with the Quran that you have with your phone. What happens to you if you don't check your phone every hour? You feel anxiety. If you leave your phone at home, what happens? Oh, you have to go back because you can't leave home without your phone. Why? Because this represents your connection to the world. This Quran is your connection to Allah. You shouldn't leave home without it. Have a copy of with it. Have the app. Check it. Look at it just like you look at your phone, like you look at the apps. So this is why I've always had an attachment to the Quran, because the Quran wasn't just a book to me. It was a book that guided my behavior in life. From the way I interacted with animals, from the way that I interacted with people, everything. And I decided specifically to write a book about paradise, because I don't know about you, when I was younger, I always felt like, what's the topic of the lecture today? Munkar al-Nakir, death, barzakh, Yawm al-Qiyamah, Jahannam. I just felt like it was all doom and gloom. But there has to be balance, yes? Allah warns us of punishment, but He spends a lot more time going into detail about what He's prepared for us. So there is wa'ad in Quran, but there's wa'id. It's a balance. The believer has to be balanced between hope and fear. So before I wrote the book, I went online to see, has anyone written a book on paradise from a Quranic perspective? There's really no in-depth book on Jannah in the Quran, where it really takes all of the verses that describe paradise and provide a commentary in a way that's appealing to a Western audience. Now I just want to share a few things that I've mentioned in the book just to give you an idea of the style. Number one, there are five chapters in the book. Chapter number one is about the existence of paradise. Does paradise exist now, or is it something that Allah is going to create in the future? I get into detail about that. Then in chapter 2, I speak about the path to paradise. I collect the verses in the Holy Quran where Allah promises paradise to those who do specific things. And then in chapter 3 and 4 are really the bulk of the book. Chapter 3 is a discussion of the material blessings of paradise. You know, the food, the palaces, the gardens, the rivers, the garments, the clothes, all of these things. And I was having a discussion with one of the brothers about the food in paradise. Because you know, food is a big part of our lives, right? Some of us, we eat 17 times a day, mashallah. It's a very central part of our lives. It's interesting that when you look at the Quran, when Allah speaks about ta'amul Jannah, most of the verses speak about what? Fruits. There are only 2 verses in the Quran where Allah mentions meat. Some people are saying, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Some of the mufassirin of the Quran, what do they say? They say this may be an implicit instruction from Allah to reduce your meat consumption. Right? Why? Because Rasulullah, you know, if I want to use, you know, modern terms, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a semi-vegetarian. The Prophet never used to eat meat every day. He used to eat meat maybe once a month. And the Prophet doesn't do anything unless it's something that's going to promote your spiritual growth. Not only is it not healthy, it's also not good for your spirituality. You're constantly eating meat. So reduce it. You know, we're familiar with that narration that's attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know, don't make your stomach a grave for animals. If you're Iraqi, if you're Lebanese, your stomach is not just a grave, it's a mass grave for animals. So I speak about why certain foods are mentioned in the Quran, whether they have symbolic meanings, whether they're literal. And I also speak, for example, about the furniture in Jannah. And I'll share with you one verse that when I was doing my research, it really caught my attention. When you go, I'll ask the sisters, because I would imagine that guys are not really that into furniture. You know, most of us would probably live like Sayyid Sistani if we weren't married. We wouldn't have furniture. But sisters, when you go furniture shopping, do you pay attention to the exterior or the interior of the furniture? So fabric, you're looking mostly at the exterior, yes? When Allah describes the mattresses of paradise, He says, مُتَّكِئِينَ عَلَى فُرُشٍ. They will be reclining on mattresses or furniture. بَطَائِنُهَا مِنْ اسْتَبْرَقٍ. The inner lining of this furniture is made up of istabrak, which was the finest silk known to the Arabs. Allah describes the interior. But when you look for furniture, you look for the exterior. The Mufassirin, they say, look at this. If the interior is made of the finest silk, what is the exterior made of? Allah doesn't mention it, because you can't even fathom what it's made of. The best thing that you can imagine, Allah says, that's the inner lining. That's the inner lining. بَطَائِنُهَا مِنْ اسْتَبْرَقٍ. And there are many ayat that are discussed, and I'll conclude with this about the levels of paradise. You know, so there's the material blessings, and then chapter 4 is the spiritual blessings, because human beings, we're bodies and we're souls. So Jannah provides pleasures for the body, and it also provides delights for the soul, because that's what you are. You're a body and you're a soul. So chapter 4 is the spiritual rewards, being in the company of prophets, the pleasure of Allah. And there's other ayat that I mentioned. And then the last chapter is the levels of paradise, the gates, and the vastness of paradise. And I'll end with this hadith where I mention the status of the lowest person in Jannah. So this is like the lowest degree. This is the one who has the lowest status in paradise. Imam al-Sadiq describes the lowest degree in Jannah. He says, "Inna adna ahl al-jannati manzilan." The lowest person in Jannah, لو نزل به الثقلان الإنس والجن لوسعهم طعاما وشرابا وَمَكَانًا وَلَمْ يَنْقُصْ مَا عِنْدَهُ شَيْءٍ. The Imam says, the lowest person in Jannah, meaning this is the guy or the girl that just made it. You know, they got, you know, the D-. They just made it. Imam says, if all human beings and all jinn were to visit him or her, they would have enough food, enough drink, enough space to host all of them, and nothing of what he has or she has would decrease. This is the lowest level. This is why Imam Zainul Abidin, he says, don't be satisfied with the lowest, compete for the higher levels. Compete to be as close to the station of the Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi alayhim ajma'in. So that's just, you know, in a nutshell what the book discusses, and now we can open up the floor for Q&A, and if we can, try to make the questions about the lectures that I gave or the book, but if you have a really pressing question, then you're welcome to ask about any topic. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.